Hey folks, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I found a little clip. Some of you know the folks over at Non-Duality Podcast some time ago put together all these compilation recordings of all the little intro kind of preambles that Peter gave over the course of his teaching. And I have a little bit from one of those. So you won't see Peter himself speaking these words, you'll just hear his voice. But he talks in this clip about the title of the book. And so we thought it might be a nice place to start with, just like 5 or 6 minutes long. So I'm going to pull this up here and share it with everyone.
So, delusion and confusion is the very present revelation and display of actuality. Which is why actuality is not. Well, it's not why, but it is evidence, further evidence, or fundamental evidence of the way in which actuality is not resolvable. It's not graspable, because something that is not actually any particular some way is obviously not actually graspable as being that way. And actuality is no way, even though it's generating an infinite, continual field of implications, that it is infinite ways. And of course we're all very familiar how effortlessly the consciousness seizes on these implications and virtually actualizes them, and all of a sudden, through a sort of this hypnotic mechanism, it seems like you're a person living in a world with a life and a history and all the complexities and problems, and life sucks, and what am I going to do about it? All of which is just innuendo and implication of transcendental, completely incoherent subtle energy, which alone exists, which alone is present. I subtitled the book that I wrote, The Inherent Perfection of Imperfection. And this is of the essence of what this yoga is about. In the basic practical terms, it's not a matter of changing anything, it's a matter of seeing what things are. And this can be, in practice, this can be a very subtle thing, because it's really easy to have a subliminal notion that there's something to achieve or some perfection to acquire, or some imperfection to eliminate, and so on and so forth. And this is most emphatically not the case. Simply seeing what anything is, you see what everything is. And when you see what everything is, it is revealed that its intrinsic nature is absolutely astounding and completely beyond improving or tainting or as I say over and over, the fundamental issue is not coming to see what reality is so much as it is seeing that our presuppositions or our notions about what it is, our feeling about what anything is completely and utterly inaccurate. So all suffering, all human suffering, all sense of unsatisfactoriness or dissatisfaction is based in this. We interpret things as being unsatisfactory, things as being frustrating, whereas in actuality nothing is like that whatsoever. And so the solution to all of these apparent problems is simply to see what this is, to see the inherent perfection of apparent imperfection. And then, of course, you discover that there is no imperfection, there is no problems, there is no unsatisfactoriness. There's just essentially what might be called unending weirdness. And this is the condition. This is the soul condition. This is your condition. This is what you are and what your universe is. And, it's important to understand, it's important to come to see that this can be seen with absolute clarity and absolute self-verifying revelation. It's not a vague or subtle or philosophical notion that one needs to aspire to or maintain or try to come to educate oneself in. On the contrary, what this is completely what it is, absolutely revealed, completely obvious, and that it is inconceivable and completely beyond conception and resolution is blatantly obvious. And as one comes to see what anything is and sees the incredible absurdity of one's notions of what things are, one becomes free of those notions as being relevant. They may or may not disappear because the mind is an unending fountain of perversion. But it becomes irrelevant. One comes to see that what this is completely beyond anything that can be thought. And so all of these thoughts about it, all these feelings about it that are assessments of ourselves, our assessments of our life, our assessments of our status, our assessments of, whether we're happy or sad and everything are based on, are completely absurd, completely, essentially irrelevant and non-existent. In effect, as one comes to see what this is, the effect is one of relaxing, of letting go into it, rather than ascending to some superior condition or something. On the contrary, it was a condition of relaxation, non-resistance. But it's not some simulated relaxation or simulated non-resistance that one aspires to or attempts to create. On the contrary, when one sees what this is, the relaxation and the non-resistance is implicit, because there's nothing to not relax into. There's nothing to try to tense against, and so on. So simply seeing is absolutely sufficient, and it happens that what this is of a nature that it discovering what it is reveals sufficiency and beauty and joy beyond your wildest fantasies.
There was a section that I thought I had to go ahead and read that touches upon, he talked about suffering and kind of the, the way in which, in that clip, that coming to see the way this is not how we're conceiving of it to be is really the discovery of a profound freedom from the things that we imagine are are problematic and the sources of our suffering. And he speaks to that in this passage here. And I'm reading from towards the bottom of page 125 in the paperback version. And the questioner says, "My experience gets so clear at times, but then there's this supposed guy who gets into a funk. What would be a good thing to do?" Peter says, "Well, look at what the quote unquote funk is made of. It's made of energy and consciousness, just like a vision of clarity is made of energy and consciousness." In that sense, they're the same thing, which is not, maybe clear at first glance, obviously. Are they really fundamentally different? Why prefer the one to the other? Why do you think clarity is clarity? Why do you think being in a funk is not clarity? And the questioner says, "Well, I know it doesn't feel good." Peter says, "Right. But instead of defining it as not feeling quote unquote good, define it as feeling a certain way. And if you look closely, it doesn't even feel a certain way." He was talking about this in the clip, that it's never any particular way. The moment, despite the power of language, right, to suggest that it is a certain way, that's how we can seem to define things. Um, that definitional process sort of sets the limit of what it is. Here's the way that it is, and now I've defined it, right? It's this. And as Peter's pointing out, owing to its, constant, its infinite complexity and its constant sort of shape shifting, it's never any particular way, ever. So it's beyond the reach of our definitions. If you look closely, it doesn't even feel a certain way. It feels a continuously changing range of ways, each of which is infinite, subtle, and indescribable. But you collapse all that infinite range of qualities simplistically as a funk and as quote unquote not good. You're oversimplifying, and you can look at that, if you can, while you're doing it and see if what you're thinking about it is actually true. It's unchangeable and totally accurate depiction of what it actually is. I see a series of waves of energies and then I put a label depression on it, the questioner says. And Peter says, sure, even in the midst of depression, there are non-depressed qualities present. Look at it closely. And even in the midst of clarity and non-depression, there are depressed-like qualities present. Our actual experience is incredibly complex and subtle. It's like a Jackson Pollock canvas or something. It's actually these splashes of energy with very little coherence. But we're expert at using the blinders of oversimplification to collapse all that down to, oh, I'm in a pretty good mood right now. But that collapsing is a vast oversimplification of the truth of our experience, which is actually more like a bombardment of complex, instantaneously changing energies being thrown nonstop at our awareness. Emotion, sensory noise, a sea of mental energy, and energies that defy classification, but which constantly cascade through our experiencing. There's just a chaos of energies going through my consciousness, and to oversimplify it, just being we're having a nice conversation is an absurdity. He was talking in the clip about how when you feel this infinite cascade, this bombardment of all this infinity of information, you could say. It's why he said it's like a Jackson Pollock painting, is it's suddenly the seeming coherence and the patterning of it dissolves. Just there's There's too much information for it to be clearly patterned in any particular way. That's the oversimplification. Peter says, but we do that. So try to notice the reality of what you're actually experiencing in real time. Try to notice that even when you're depressed, quote unquote, that's a vast oversimplification of your true state, which defies description. There's a complexity, a chaoticness, and an inclusiveness to our different states of mind that labeling them gives a lie to. We say, oh, I'm feeling happy today, or, quote, I'm feeling a bit depressed, or something. But the truth is always infinitely more complex than these oversimplified assessments. And because it's inherently so much more complex, the simplification is just not true. So, opening to that complexity is also opening to infinity, which is the actual condition of phenomena. Because you're opening to the inherent uncertainty of reality, you can't even know what the states you're experiencing actually are. I mean, this is, Dean and I were talking beforehand. I mean, language is so facile, like it really suggests we have this whole dictionary, right? That we know what things are, and we have language and ways of describing so much of it. But as Peter's pointing out here, when you actually look at this cascade, this infinite, like what's actually being experienced right now, and its transience, its ever-changing dynamism, it's it's so clear that it is absolutely impossible to determine what it is, to get to the bottom of it. Hence, all of our ways of describing it are wrong, inaccurate. You can't even know what the states you're experiencing actually are. You can't know because if you look at them really closely, they open up to more complexity and more subtlety without end. It's bottomless. So, where do you put your finger down and say, yeah, this is the state? If you look closely into any state, it opens into the infinite energy that it actually is. And it's only your conceptual simplification that you can label as bad or good. You like it or you don't like it. But that labeling is a lie because you're not seeing what is really there, what it really is. If you experience the energy intimately as it is, you'll be experiencing infinite, chaotic, undefinable waves of energy. And what that is so out of the league of being able to simply like it or not like it. I just love that. It's so out of the league of being able to simply like it or not like it. We dumb ourselves down. We oversimplify our own experience by not noticing what it really is, largely through this semantic mechanism of labeling. We're addicted to it. But the antidote is to see what it really is. Let ourselves see. We're hypnotized. We don't allow ourselves to really look at it. Just this last little bit. The questioner in this little section here, this chapter is I think titled Problems, and they were asking this whole question about whether or not they should do feng shui, and they were talking about I don't really know the context of that conversation exactly, but that they were discussing this, and the questioner goes on. Just want to read this last little bit because it's great. It says, "So if I think about doing a feng shui cure in my house to make it better, it already is." And Peter says, sure, but look and see for yourself. See the open-ended, infinite perfection of the situation. Or try the feng shui cure. It doesn't matter either way. It doesn't matter, as Peter likes to say, it doesn't matter what you do. It's what it is. Or try the feng shui cure. It doesn't matter either way. It doesn't change what things are. If you think in terms of making it better, quote unquote, more divine, look and see what those ideas can mean in reality. Just because we have a word in our language doesn't mean it refers to a real thing. If you use quote unquote divine the way I do to mean what is, then clearly everything is divine because everything that is is. So you can't possibly make anything more divine. In other words, what you're doing or not doing doesn't change the fact of this absolute as the Tibetans call it, the great perfection of what is, the divinity of what is. It's unbreakably that, regardless of how it's appearing, regardless of what's happening, regardless of how we're interpreting it, regardless of what we're trying to do to correct it or not do, and none of that. It remains itself, as Peter always says. It never departs from itself, from its infinity, from its boundlessness, from its indescribability. Hey, Dennis.
Good morning.
Morning.
Uh, I was just thinking, if someone were watching me from outside, they would think I've been listening to a stand-up comic this morning. As you know, there's just keep seeing it. It's fun, and I mean, it's just like, but someone would think I was listening to a stand-up comic. That's just basically what I wanted to share, which I find very interesting and fun. And sorry about the dog barking, but Lucy, stop. Um, uh, that's it. That's it. It's just that, um, and I love being in this space, I should say as well. Thank you.
Which part of it is the stand-up comic part? Is it the
Well, I mean, those realizations that he says that, that lands with me in a way that it's like, and a lot of times, are the rugs being pulled out from under you and you go, oh, oh yes, which a stand-up comic does. Oftentimes is pulls the rug out from under you, lead
right?
it to a certain point and then pulls the rug out from under you.
Yes.
So, I would say reading these books and doing this study is about perpetually having the rug being pulled out from under you. Um, and you landed on your ass and you laugh about it. So
Yeah.
that's it's just that realization of, and I can look at the last couple of months in my life. It's like I have been telling myself that, I mean, I have been, I've been feeling a different kind of being tired and exhausted, but it's not there all the time. And even when I'm in the midst of the exhaustion, there's still seeing the beauty outside my window and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just an energy, and it does come and seems like it hovers over me like a dark cloud sometime, this exhaustion, but it's, and then in this game of being me, I see my doctor and we do tests and we do stuff like that, but it's just seeing that it's really, it's something, but it's not what I'm labeling it.
That's the thing. It's something. It seems to be something, and it's that exhaustion, for example, is, if you put that in the category of that's the imperfection of some kind, maybe not your ideal feeling to be experiencing, right?
Oh
And
yeah, it's definitely not my ideal way
yeah,
of
exactly. Exactly.
feeling.
But like he was saying in that clip, in the title of the subtitle of the book, the perfection in imperfection. In other words, the perfection doesn't exist somehow outside of what we might be describing as not perfect and not ideal, right? It actually, the imperfection is made of the same thing that everything is made of.
Right.
And that's the profound thing to see, that it is, there's one thing that
Or not.
looks like all this diversity, or not a thing, obviously, but yes, one reality
Yeah.
that can look like a lot of having a lot of energy, and it can look like not having a lot of energy, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those are two ways of characterizing descriptively what's happening, experientially. And the whole point that he's making here throughout all of his work and what Dean and I are sharing and we're all exploring is how true as that may seem to be that we've been able to collapse our experience down into some description,
Right.
we really actually can't. Like the experience itself, reality itself, is not collapsible into anything. It's not simplifiable. It's too complex, too infinite, too ever changing to ever be able to actually grasp hold of it with any concept. And that's a discovery of a freedom that's present within all experience, freedom from all the ways we're holding it conceptually, all the
Yeah,
way.
I mean, that word of freedom I like because that's even part of the joke, I think, is seeing the joke. There's a sense of freedom there that's not there when you're not seeing the joke of it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna actually bring that up, just related to what you said about the stand-up comic nature of this. I think that's fairly universal in this process of realization, the realization of what this actually is, because we come to see that these things that we take so seriously, that we are convinced without question are true, and we organize an entire life and an entire belief system around these notions and these beliefs. And when we see that, oh, it's not actually like that, it has a quality of the absurd. Like, it's rather absurd that we can imagine that things are a certain way. And so I think the laughter quality, or the humor quality, or the stand-up comic qualities, the way you put it, it's this combination of seeing the absurdity of what we've always held to be true, that it's absurd. And also it's a mixture of relief. Like, as Peter would always say, it's a load off when you come to see that, oh, it's not really what I thought it was. So sometimes all you can do is laugh. All you can do is just that combination of relaxation and freedom, and seeing the absurdity of how we were holding it. Um, it is kind of like comedy in a way. So I think you're on the money with that, Dennis.
And there's another way that I think about it, actually also in that moment, there's a sense of wonder,
Mm,
there's a sense of surprise,
mm,
maybe and an element of being in awe, you
yeah,
know, of it at that time. It's like it's all there together,
yeah. Because
So
not only do you see that it's not what I've always held it to be, it's not anything else either. It's not like I'm replacing one belief system with another. It's coming to see that it's it's everything. It's anything and everything, and it's always this. And so mixed in with that relaxation and freedom and sense of absurdity is exactly that. It's this holy shit quality. Like, it's it truly is astounding.
yeah, and then I notice even right now there's a niggling little part. I need to hang on to this, which again is hang on to this.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
good
and
luck.
that's part of the freedom, and not part of like the freedom of like there isn't anything to hold on to.
Yeah, but there's the thought that I
Well, I
can.
understand that. Yeah. Like that thought, like I could, or that again, that tendency we have to like privilege certain states over other states. And that's why
Right.
the subtitle's so powerful. Like when we're visited as we seem to be by the things that are, you know, the rough and tumble of life that can occur, the imperfections, if you will, like they're they're made of this pure mystery. That's what they are, this bottomless mystery. Like they really, really are. And um, yeah, I mean, is that not always easy to see when the shit's particularly hitting the fan? Sometimes it can seem like it's harder to access that because there's a kind of um, the seeming nature of it really seems to be very much the case, and it can seem difficult sometimes to kind of recognize that our descriptions aren't telling us the entire story about what's going on there.
And even our experiences aren't telling us the whole story either. But
Yeah,
we think
nothing is. The story can't be told.
It
check
can't
in
be,
tomorrow.
but it can be, it is known. It can be known. It
Yeah.
can be, that's the self-verifying nature that they talk about in Dzogchen, and that Peter used that phrase in that clip that John played. It's you you can't cognitively, you're never going to get it. You're going to keep grasping and it's always going to be slipping through your fingers. But experientially, you can't miss it. Experientially, it is what it is. It is this. It's what you've always known. It's the only thing you've always felt. It just, what falls away is the need to tell it what it is, the need to understand it cognitively in some way, the need to know what it is, the need to figure it out, the need to make it better, the need to judge it, the need to compare it, the need to name it, the need to talk about it. All of that, when you come to see the absurdity of trying to do any of those things, all of that begins to sort of fall away. And as Peter said in the clip, it doesn't disappear completely. It's always there. Thinking is always there. Analyzing is always there. It just becomes much less important. It's like the crazy person gibbering away, like in another room. Like it's going to talk, it's going to try to analyze, the mind's going to try to do what it does. But when you see the absurdity of what it's trying to do, it just becomes less important. It becomes less the focal point of your attention.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
Hey, Garrison.
Hi,
Good to see you.
you too. First, I'd like to say I thought unending weirdness was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's a good way. It's a good way to describe it.
So I want to try and piece together a couple things he
Uh-huh.
said here. One, in the feng shui section, he went on to say, no story is factual, and you can't know for certain that your story is accurate. And then, if I can get to this page, hold on a second. How do I do this? Um, like page 45. Um, so he talks about I had it here. It is. Um, the very fact of building a story is egoism, and we get and that's all that traps us when we get trapped. And once you see that all the elements that your story is made of don't actually exist as objective realities in the ways that you think they do, then your whole story collapses. And where does that leave you? I need some elucidation about that because I feel like I have a story. I feel like I'm a unique being in this universe that has gone through unique experiences and has unique memories. But I don't have an actual story. It's a fabrication. It's a limitation, my story is, of what things really are and have been. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, I guess the simple answer, but the um so the narration of what's going on, let's call it the story of like let's take something that's not a loaded story, but I'm on a computer having a conversation over Zoom with Garrison, John Aston. So I just told a story I narrated what's happening. I described the situation that's occurring or an aspect of it, right? So what Peter's saying in that section there is that each of the elements that make up that story, like let me start with the there's so many assumptions underlying the stories that sort of when unquestioned, we carry on as if the stories have actually captured the fullness of what's actually happening. So it's not that the stories have no relevance at all. It's just that they're incomplete, they're partial, they're over. He was highlighting that they're oversimplifications, and the reason they're oversimplifications, which is what the inquiry or his in his terms the yoga is about discovering, is that each of the elements that make up a given story. So in my rendering of this situation, let me start with me, like John Aston, the story. John Aston's like, well, I mean, I could tell a story of what I am. I could seem to define myself as a core component of this story of engaged in a conversation with Garrison. I'm just starting with one piece of it, right? But what am I? I mean, really, what am I? Am I a body? Am I a mind? Am I a personality? And either any of those are pure mysteries, what the body is fundamentally, what the mind, quote unquote, is, what a personality is. Am I the same John that I was 1 second ago, let alone 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago? I mean, I'm starting to like unpack what that one component of the narration of John having a conversation. John is a pure, absolute, infinite mystery, what I actually am. I'm inconceivable, as is every other phenomena. So you see, so now it's like, so when I say I'm doing something like having a conversation, the narration always begs the question, what are those component parts? What are they? And they're ultimately fathomless, boundless, infinite mysteries as to what they really are. In other words, that we can never get to the true identity of each of those components because they have no final identity. They're infinite, they're endless, they're complex beyond imagination. They're infinitely complex, right? And so the more we sort of tune into that by exploring our experience in the ways that we do here, the more we come to see that the narrations are just Peter used this term in one of the other books about the Cliff Notes version of reality, right? Like you read a novel and then you get it's a 1,000-page novel with all this detail of the relationships and then you read the Cliff Notes version. It's like, this is what happened in a few pages, right? So our narrations are like they're Cliff Note versions at best of what seems to be happening. But the interpretations, the narrations, the stories are all they're finite, they're definitions. And this reality that's being encountered right now, which includes us, whatever we are, is not something finite. It's not something fixed. It's not something resolvable. And this can be discovered. And then we discover that what we are and what everything is beyond the stories, beyond the narratives. It doesn't negate the narratives completely. It just puts them in a vaster context, you could say, of the fundamental indefinability and impossibility of narrating this.
So if you were going to write, or would you even try to write a biography about yourself, would you think it would be impossible to really define who you have been and what has happened to you because it would always be an oversimplification?
Yeah, it seems like, speaking of like stand-up comedy, like it seems like it seems ridiculous. Like it
Uh,
seems like where would I begin? Like which part of the infinity would I carve out and then try to describe? You see what I mean? It's like, and there's a freedom in feeling how infinitely vast everything actually is. In other words, it's not contained in the boxes that we think it's contained in, the conceptual boxes and frames of reference. I mean, we can play with those as we do. You know, we're playing with boxes now and ways of speaking about this. But most important point though is because we can discuss this as we are, but to really feel your experience and discover or investigate whether or not what Peter's talking about, what Dean and I are talking about, has any merit or has any validity to it. Like when I look, what I find is this impossible to grasp, impossible to think about or narrate reality because the very instant that I've thought I've pinned down what it is and been able to tell a story about it, even before that, it's already on to its next, you could say, iteration, its next version of itself. So It's just a shapeshifter, and you can't describe a shapeshifter.
Right. I like that, but you must realize, of course, we're all conditioned to believe that we have a story, and some of these stories are going to be judged someday, I guess, who we are, what we've done. And I do think there's a narration going through many of our heads about who we've been, especially as you get to a certain age. So, yes, it is freeing to think that the narration can't really capture who we've been and who we are. But it's interesting. No biography from me then.
I mean, you're still free to write a biography. It's all good, like nothing. In other words, if you write a biography or I write a biography or I narrate something about my life, because I tell stories about what's going on all the time in my conversations with people, right? So none of that has to stop. It's just we gain an appreciation of like, well, we're much, much more than the stories, we're infinitely more than the stories, and without having to get rid of the stories. Tina, did you
Yeah.
want to add something to the conversation?
I mean, there's not much to add. I think you've said it really well. But I just kind of noticing that it's these stories that, they're the basis of all of our suffering. Or I should say the belief in these stories
Yeah.
is the basis of all of our suffering. In fact, that's an important distinction that I should make. It's not the stories that we suffer. The stories are part of the play. They're part of the richness of this aliveness, but the belief that those stories are actual, that those stories are factual, that those stories are true, that's what we suffer. That's because it's not the actuality of the situation. And you're right, Garrison, like we in our culture especially, we have these really deep-seated belief in these stories that I should have a purpose. I should be significant. I should achieve something. I should be thought of in a certain way. Um, and these stories, they cause they cause us to suffer. They cause the delusion. They cause this belief that the grass is always greener, this belief that things should be different than they are, the belief that I should be different than I am, and the endless questing to try to be that way, which is of course futile. It never you never get there because the nature of what this is not finite. The nature of what this is, as John was just beautifully pointing out, it's this endlessly opening, endlessly changing, endlessly morphing. That's the nature of things. And so to believe that things could be a different way, to believe that it's to use what we started with, to believe that this is somehow imperfect, but it can somehow be made to be perfect, you're constantly fighting against reality because reality is not that way. So the trick, the cure, the solution, as Peter called it, in the first thing that John played, the solution is not to fix things to be a different way. The solution is to see how things are,
Yeah.
see what this is. And that's where, to bring it back to Dennis's point, the seeing of that is a load off. It's a complete, it has completely different implications than the belief system that I was talking about earlier. So it's the belief in the stories that creates all the suffering in the world. It's not the
And
story.
that's because we feel limited. I mean, the belief in the story um, limits us to who we really are. Is that what you're saying? I don't understand why that causes suffering.
The stories imply things. And for example, one of the things they imply, to take a common story, like let's say in order to have value, I need to achieve certain things. So the implication of that story is, first of all, that I'm a separate person. I'm separate from the world. And there's an implication that I haven't achieved enough. And all of these, as we start to act on these stories that aren't true, and they're not true to who we are, we become hypnotized and into a sort of identity An identity is I'm a separate person. I'm a separate person that needs to do something different than what I'm doing right now. Or I'm a separate person that's going to be thought of in this way. And none of that is ever true. But when I come to see what this actually is and the infinity and that I'm actually just this transcendental cascading of experiential qualities that are just appearing, when I come to be oriented to that, because that's who I really am. All of these sort of smaller stories, you could say, they're free to go on because I'm not invested in them. My identity isn't invested in them. My identity is more, I come to see more what I actually am.
This is good to hear. Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the implications of this discovery in terms of our, you could say our well-being, our search for well-being are just, I mean, it cannot be overstated in my view. Because as Dina was saying, like that sense that I'm an individual, uh, separate individual, separated out from the whole of reality, and that I'm as this individual trying to navigate and make my way and defend against all the possible threats that exist out there or within myself or from other people. And that whole drama that most humans are engaged in of trying to secure their well-being in X, Y, or Z ways, including being noticed by people in a certain way or valued by people in a certain way or guarding against people disliking. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, doesn't it? But all of that way, and this again comes back to the narrative thing. It's like that whole story, that whole way of describing reality, of being an individual existing in a world that at any moment, we could be overwhelmed by or stressed by or traumatized by or confused by, is in one very real sense entirely defined, described into existence. That from this perspective of nothing is even thinkable or resolvable as being any particular way, opens up this entirely other way to encounter human life, we could say, that feels in one sense as a human being navigating a complex world. Like that's all there. But that story that I just told of me being a human navigating a complex world that's sometimes very difficult to navigate, seemingly, is like that's both true, but utterly not true because all the pieces of that narration, when you investigate what they are, what they're made of, what their nature is, that you come up empty-handed. You don't find things.
Mhm.
The world isn't made up of things, of pieces and parts, even though it seems to be. And that is, um, yeah, that's what he said in that clip, that is it. There's a relaxation that comes about by recognizing that because how did he put it? It's like there's nothing to be tense about. It happens naturally rather than me trying to relax. And it's like the relaxation of reality itself is there's no struggle. There aren't things struggling with other things or fighting against other things. I mean, that's all there in other words, that the world of form with all these pieces and parts interacting and sometimes in disharmony with one another and conflict with one another, that's there. Seems to be how it appears like that, and it looks like that, and can be experienced like that. And yet, at the same time, weirdly, this is the unending weirdness. Weirdly, when you go to look, you can't find any of that. And it's maybe sounds bizarre to say it, but like again, something less charged, like I said, like our having a conversation over Zoom, here it is. And yet when you go to look for what it actually is, you don't find it as a being a particular thing or being a particular way. You just find this again, this cascade, this of ever changing, ever morphing. You can't even say that it's energy because what's energy? I don't even know. You know. Thanks, Garrison.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Hi, Libby.
Hi, just a little sharing from this morning. Um, And the challenge of the narrative is in full effect of even telling the sharing. But when I woke up this morning, there was just a seeing feeling of the thought feeling, thought sensation energy, and just seeing that, and as opposed to interpreting it, just being with it and seeing it, looking at it, and then seeing that it could only, there's a onlyness to the thisness of it, that this is only, is always only this only. And then having that only word for some reason shift into onely, sticking an E in there, only onely, and then having the urge to attempt to illustrate the feeling thought dance. And I thought, I'll take one color for thought and then I'll whip in the other, the feeling one around it. And then, of course, it came to the allness. But I just thought it was very funny with the Jackson Pollock bit of what was that this was my little morning entry
There you
here.
go. There's the beautiful, glorious incoherence. Yeah.
That's
Gina and I were talking before the call about how just sort of mind-numbingly crazy. I mean, to me, it's just I continue to marvel and be, I don't know, just kind of blown away by the paradox of a world that shows up as something not like that drawing, but something very patterned, very structured, very like this doesn't look incoherent. Like this looks like you. There's Libby and there's John and we're talking and it's very structured and patterned and recognizably so, right? But again, when you go to look for what those patterns are, they're dancing patterns. And because they're moving, they're alive. And in their aliveness, where's the pattern? It's like it's this way and then it's this way and then it's this way and then it's this way. And it's really, as Peter said, it's not any way because it's the minute you think it's a certain way, it's become another way. So where's the pattern? And how bizarre is that reality is both your drawing, that incoherence, unpatterned, unstructured, unresolvability that looks exquisitely patterned and recognizable and identifiable. And that's its, as he said in that clip, it's constantly suggesting that it is something, isn't it? It's suggesting that here it is. It's very strongly suggesting that there's something here, isn't it? And it's part of its beauty in a way that it's like it's not, as he would say, not nothing, even if you can't find it, because it's this. It's all this display, the magical display.
Always only, onely this.
Thanks, Livy.
And to John's point, this is literally infinitely subtle. One of the things that makes this so slippery is, as John just said, this appears to be a certain way. And one quality of that is some of these patterns appear to have some persistence. They appear to have some continuity. Like when I logged on and I saw John, I recognized him as John. And so the implication of that appearance is that John is this consistent, recognizable person that I know John. I've talked to John before. We've had conversations before. It's the same John I talked to before. But all of that is part of the magical display. It's part of the infinite way that this can appear to be. But again, when you go looking for any of that, when I go looking for that constancy, when I go looking for my friend John, as John said, if I took any of those words and I sort of really go into them and I try to pin them down, all I find is this open-ended, unresolvable, ever-changing, never landing on anything thing. And yet that apparent continuity, that apparent constancy is also part of the very appearance. So when we talk about that this can appear as any way, we're not just talking visually, we're not just talking, the field of sound. it's every dimension. It can appear to be a certain way. But again, the discovery, the place to look is when you go actually looking for those apparent patterns, you find experience. And what is experience? And when you go looking at that, that's when it reveals itself to be what it is and what you are. And so by seeing what you're not, you see what you are.
I'm just going to read another little section here, if that's okay, since there wasn't a hand up. This is at the bottom of page 130. Peter says, everything whatsoever is a symbol as an expression of the divine being. The shit in the toilet is an expression of the divine, the functioning of reality. The dirt on the floor is an expression of the divine. A situation that's falling apart is an expression of the divine. Because what did it come from? What's it made of? Where does it exist? Its energy and consciousness co-created with all the universe. All phenomena are the expression of the perfection of being. Every aspect of the universe is an expression of that same perfection, including rundown houses, wars, all our problems, as well as what we consider beautiful and holy. You can't separate anything out. It's all a whole system, a package deal. So thinking of things as problems, as quote unquote bad or sacred and holy, is just spin doctoring. Making up stories about this whole unfathomable system that reality inalienable is. The spin doctoring, positive or negative, can't change the fundamental nature and ongoing functioning of the system of reality, being. It's all already happening and is not amenable to oversimplified explanations. The isness of things as they are is their divine aspect, not our take on them. Let me read that again. The isness of things, just the sheer existence of this moment, as it is, as they are, is their divine aspect, not our take on them, not our spin on them, our interpretation. The isness of ourselves is our divine aspect. The fact that I exist as I do means that I am God. Done deal. Just that very fact alone means I've crossed the finish line. I am one with the full system of reality, and of course that applies to everything else that exists too. It's like the simple feeling of your own being, as he said, is that's the done deal. That's the divinity. Like that's the finish line. The existence of everything is the existence of the divine, is an expression of that whole system, system, the one reality. And which is part of the liberating aspect of that discovery is that it's not dependent on what's being experienced. Because every experience is that an expression of that same system, that same singularity. Hey, Ted.
Hi, John. So, as a result of studying this stuff in the last few months, I feel like I have finally figured out or understood how to experience God. And, I've studied various spiritual things for over 50 years. Was really kind of wondering, well, why don't I really know how to experience God, or like, is there really a God? Is it experienceable? But through studying this stuff, I feel like I've come to this um, realization that God is uh, this mysterious um, fountain of experience that is constantly um, displaying a new experience. In other words, and I feel like one of the way that there's certain requirements that I have to see, that anybody has to see to get to this experience. And one of them is that it's always now. Now is what's real. The future isn't real, the past isn't real. Now is the only thing that's actually actual or real. And and then so I think most people can see that fairly easily. Um, and then to see impermanence, to see that this now, whatever's happening is always changing moment to moment. Um, and then to see that I'm not doing any of it. And it's all just happening on its own. And I don't really know what's going to happen next. I don't really know um, even what anything is. But and I've been, playing around with, talking with some friends and saying, hey, I've discovered how to experience God, and I can show you in like 2 minutes or 1 minute. And most people are willing to sacrifice a minute, to try to check something out. And so I've been like experimenting with telling people that, and so I go through so first you got to see that it's now, then you got to see that this now is constantly changing every moment. Then you got to see that you're not doing any of it, and then so the source, something is doing that. It's mysterious and it's like infinitely more intelligent and complex. So that's something, my sense is that something is God. And so I'm just wondering, would you add more steps to that, or would you say that there's other things that a person needs to see? Um, yeah, so that's or like, yeah, what's your reaction to that whole deal? Because I think it is so simple. It is so simple that in 2 minutes, an ordinary person could see that. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, on one hand, you're absolutely right. It's so simple. It's accessible to anyone at any time. And then on the other hand, you're demonstrating what seems rather common to me, that somehow the seeing of it, there's still this tendency to want to put it into something that's resolvable, to want to explain it, to want to share it, to want to give it a method, to want to give it a formula, to want to give it steps. We we have this love of putting things in really orderly, rational ways that we can convey it and share it and talk about it, which is part of the absurdity of once you see what it is, the idea that that can be done is rather absurd. You're free to try, of course. You won't be the first, and you certainly won't be the last, to try to put reality into a 7 steps to enlightenment or enlightenment in a weekend. Um, but good luck with that. Um, to me, but I also understand because it is a load off when you see what this is. It's what I was saying before. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I was so stressed about life when it's nothing like what I thought it was. And so there can be a natural tendency to want to express that, to want to like enlighten everyone else that, hey, wait a minute, it's not what you think it is. So that tendency is certainly understandable. But then you have to sort of ask yourself again, like, why is it that I think anyone else needs this? This goes to that the apparent imperfection, that it's actually perfect. Like there's this idea that now I need to show everyone else, or I need to fix everyone else, or I need to enlighten everyone else. And the sentiment behind it is completely understandable, and it's completely true, and it's completely generous. But again, just keep seeing the tendency that we have to put things into rationality, to fit things into steps, or to fit things into rationality. I mean, good luck with that. I mean, like I said, you can try, but what this is mysterious, and how someone comes to see it is mysterious. And it seems to me it's completely unique for every single being. I think the best you can do, I think, is to just point people back to experience itself, point people back to the orientation, to the nature of experience itself, and then let it do what it does. Um, some people will be interested in this. Some people will want to look. Some people will have no interest, and they'll think you're a lunatic and that you're a crazy person. But that out to me, I just always feel like, well, that's none of my business. So I don't know. I don't know if that helps at all, but the adding of steps, good luck with that, is what I would say. John, you're muted.
Yeah, just to add one thing, Ted, one that's just occurring that, and Dina said this, that the impulse to, I mean, as some of these things started to dawn in my own life, like I couldn't help myself but want to communicate them. I can't really say why, but I don't know. It's there, and so I wouldn't. If that feels natural to you to want to, invite people into a discovery that has, been profound for you and transformative for you, that's a natural thing to do. So I would just say, just follow your own instincts around it. And in terms of like, we don't need to get into it now, but the question occurs to me, like, well, how are people responding to what you're inviting them into? And then sometimes Dean and I have chatted about this before, that we both really appreciate when we have opportunities to dialogue with people individually, because even though we're presenting something to now a large group of people, it's like everybody's in their own place and has their own particular ways of, it's not a one size fits all, I think, when it comes to introducing people to this sort of understanding. And so I would just say, if you're talking to people about it and inviting them to explore their experience as you are, whether it's laid out as steps or not, to me, it doesn't really matter. But in either case, it's like, see what just follow the thread of how they're responding to your invitation. And then you may suddenly, I've noticed when I'm working with people individually, like stuff comes out of those conversations that I've never ever considered before, ways of metaphors or ways of pointing to this that seem like they're emerging out of where that particular person is in a way. And that maybe only would have occurred, I mean, who knows, but because I was talking to them in that moment, you know? So let it be, as much as possible, sort of alive in the moment as you're sharing it and see what kind of shape it takes in terms of you're trying to introduce people to this. That would be one suggestion.
Yeah, it seems so simple, and then those steps. I mean, I don't do those steps. I just realize that it
Yeah.
is always now, and
Yep.
now is always changing, and I'm not doing any of it. I just see so many people in the spiritual marketplace meditating for decades and taking more programs and thinking they're not enlightened and
Yep.
trying to improve themselves. And it's like if you see somebody who's walking around hitting themselves on the head with a hammer, you have natural compassion. Like you don't need to do that. You don't need to make that effort. You don't need to uh, struggle in that way and suffer. Um, Natural to, I don't. I'm not saying anybody in the spiritual marketplace is intentionally misleading people. They probably all think they're doing something useful, and
Hmm.
they're, they're becoming enlightened, and they're getting better themselves, and they're this and they're that. And but it's just such a, I guess, such a waste of time and effort and energy and money. And so my sense is, if I could help people not to do that, that would make sense.
I,
Yeah,
I feel you.
yeah, same. I mean, when you see, that's what I was saying earlier, like the belief and these belief systems that people start to orient around and people start to, you know, all of this striving and all of this seeking and all of this, the spiritual marketplace, as you say, all of this commodification of let's make things different because you need to be different than how you are. I need to be different than how I am. And when you actually see the absurdity of that, as we were talking about earlier, the tendency is like, oh my God, like there is this sense of wanting to sort of point that out to people. And as John said, I think you just you express who you are. You like that's what Peter would always say is your job is to be who you are, to express who and what you are. And that's unique for every expression of reality. And so if you're, as John said, if you're moved to try to express this to people or try to point this out to people, go for it. Um, if you're moved to, go within and to sort of be with it yourself and not breathe a word about it, that's perfectly perfect too. Um, so, but it's literally impossible to put this into any kind of predictable method or steps. But seeing why that is, if you can point out why that is, and that in itself is a profound seeing as to why this can't be put into steps and why this can't be predicted and why it's not a one size fits all prescription, as John said. The seeing of why that is the seeing, is the powerful seeing.
I just want to read a very brief thing that Dina reminded me of when we were chatting beforehand. At the very beginning of the book, apropos, Ted, our conversation with you. Um, Very beginning, where this chapter is entitled "The Inherent Perfection of Imperfection." And Peter says most people, if they even care, labor under the mistaken notion that quote unquote enlightenment has something to do with what we do in our lives, cleaning up our behavior, ratcheting up our compassion, clearing up our obscurations, purifying our bad karma, thinking positive thoughts, thinking no thoughts, helping little old ladies across the street, in general, trying to emulate what we imagine an enlightened being acts like, as if the behavior makes the condition. That's all hogwash. It turns out that enlightenment is the inherent condition of being itself. Like that is the simplest. Talk about the simplicity, Ted. We were talking about the simplicity of this. Enlightenment or God is the inherent condition of being itself, the existence itself. That's that's the simplest. Like we don't even need to read anymore. We don't need to have any more groups to discuss all of this. Like just really get that. The inherent condition of being itself. So it's already a done deal. Nothing in being needs to be cleaned up, purified, made more positive, made more compassionate. The mediocre, imperfect victim most of us fear ourselves to be is already God without needing to lift a finger. Our world as it is heaven. Our life already a pageant of divine celebration. Hallelujah. The very fact that any particular condition in our experience even exists at all means it has already crossed the finish line. Being equals enlightenment, period. If any condition is, it is inherently absolutely perfect. The clouds in the sky, the shit in the toilet, tag, you're it. You may as well sell your mala and trade in your meditation robe for a bikini and go work on your tan. It won't make the tiniest bit of difference to the actual condition of anyone or anything, whether or not you do. As only Peter could say it. Hey, Nancy.
Yeah, I just want to say, when I was listening to Ted, just my heart flowed. I had this grin on my face. I could feel the love and joy of the discovery, um, and just the love and joy of sharing. I'm sure I mean, maybe he was standing out on the street corner just on a box and, talking to anybody who looked his way. Maybe he was talking to, friends of his that whatever. I totally get um, the joyfulness of this discovery, and it's a freaking unfolding, and it unfolds however it does, whether I'm talking to my cat or my best friend or whatever. And I just want to say, rock out, Ted. That is your passion, and your joyfulness of this is just so beautiful. And and it unfolds however it does, who knows? Like you said, you're not going to know, you know, what's happening tomorrow. And so I just wanted to give you a shout out because it's just really beautiful. Just the joy that you're being with.
Yeah, that's well said,
Yeah,
Nancy. It
agreed.
reminds me of a few conversations I had with Peter before he died, because I just had this sense that I wanted to express this in some way, and I also at the same time could feel like that I was just completely inept, like that, like it just could not be expressed, like it was ineffable. Um,
Yeah, but that's our nature. One person has one nature, and they feel doubt, and another person has a different nature. I mean, that's why I'm just giving him the shout out. He sounds like he was just being true to his nature. You were being true to your nature. It's just an amazing thing.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. So Peter's response to me saying, I want to express this, but I can't. And he pointed out the absurdity of that belief, which was, he would say, you're already expressing it. You are it. And just because it doesn't, I might have some idea of what it's supposed to look like or what it needs to look like or what it conventionally might look like. All of that was just made up in my imagination. And so you never know, like to Ted's point, like you are expressing it. You can't not express it. You just your being. And it will, Peter would always say that so much of this happens underneath the table. Like it just happens in these mysterious, subtle, um, slippery ways that aren't logical and are totally mysterious. Um, so it made me see like, oh, the stress, the like I could scratch that off of my to-do list of like figuring out how to express this because it's going to express itself, as you said, Nancy, however it does.
Right. And the other thing that's coming to me is who knows who anybody might say something to that they just been waiting to hear that. I mean, we just don't know anything. And, I take all the blankets off. That's all I'm saying. Take the blankets off. It might be just the most perfect thing for someone. That could be the most worst thing. I mean, it's all the mystery. So thank you, Ted, for being how you are.
Love that, Nancy. Thank you. Beautifully said.
And thank you for picking a perfect piece. Today was just really wonderful what you shared from the book.
Yeah, there's a lot of gems there. It's not hard to find one, but thanks.
And Peter uses this phrase in the beginning on page 7. He calls it the inherent condition of being itself, that the condition of being itself. Like, and you can feel that, like it's what you're always feeling, but notice that you're feeling that right now, being itself. And so much of yoga is just this constant noticing of this, of the feeling of being.
Hi, Keith.
Hi, I just wanted to say that on that note that what brought me here in the first place was, John, a post that you had, and you talked about that feeling, the feeling of being. And as I read it, I felt it, and I realized that I had always felt it since I was a child. I had always felt it, and that's what brought me here. And I just wanted to say that.
Oh, beautiful. It's one of those strange things too, like when Peter would talk about, in one sense, to Dina's comments about the impossibility of kind of putting this into some sort of framework or sort of teaching with steps. And, you know, Peter endeavored in his own way to create a kind of, it would seem like, or gave rise to out of his own creative inspiration and understanding, his own yoga of radiant presence, as he called it. Um, but that the simplicity of and you know of just I know what I wanted to say around that is that even though he created this yoga of radiant presence, as he called it, he would say that the one of the things you start to discover when you engage in the exploration is that something like feeling being, the simple feeling of being that you're pointing out, turns out to be what we're always experiencing. That's why you said, this is something I realized I was always experiencing. And so it's this very paradoxical thing. Like, when are we doing anything but feeling the moment, the presence of the moment, or the beingness of the moment? That's what we're always feeling. So it's this very kind of subtle but beautiful kind of nuanced thing that we start to discover that um, or something he used to use the term noticing. He used it less later on in his teaching, but you start to realize like noticing, being aware of what's here, noticing what's here, is there's nothing else that's ever going on. Very much like being is the feeling of the moment, and so that's a funny aspect of all of this that we're always engaged in that feeling of being because there's nothing but the feeling of being. That's the one thing. It's inherent in our experience. It's inherent in reality that that's what's happening.
And the power of noticing that is not to be underestimated. I mean, that's really, it's the game changer. Just it sounds so simple, and it is so simple. And as John said, you can't not do it. It's the only thing you've ever felt is this being, this presence. But putting, actually feeling that before you tell it what it is, before you name it, describe it, assume something about it, to feel this presence of this right now, right here, is unspeakably and surprisingly potent.
I was thinking about apropos that what Ted was sharing about, I always wanted to like know how to feel God, like how do I go about feeling God? And just as I was saying to Keith, like the feeling of being is what we're always experiencing. And the feeling of God, like there's nothing else. That's what we're always feeling because there's nothing but that. And it looks like an infinite number of different ways how it can seem to present, right? Which could be maybe the confusing part of that because it's not one particular way. The feeling of being can look like what we might describe as a moment of, heartbreak. And the feeling of being can look like what we might describe as cosmic bliss or something. But it's always the feeling of this. And this is everything. Thanks, everyone. Great to see you all and be with you all again. And send the recording out as soon as I'm able to download it. And we'll look forward to seeing those of who can make it next week to the meeting. And otherwise, we'll have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Dean.